Last week, I gave you my first impressions of Avowed, mainly that I loved the game. 27 hours in, what are my second impressions? Welcome back to Creative Excuses, let's jump into it. I still love it. I love it even more, actually. Avowed is a super fun game, and the only thing unfun about it has been the unnecessary hate for the game because of political beliefs. The game itself is fantastic, and I have 3 reasons why after 27 hours of playing. There are chapters for each of the topics if you want a preview. Here we go. First, the exploration is incredible. I have played games with awesome exploration, and I have played games with less than awesome exploration. One such excellent game is, of course, Baldur's Gate 3, where around every nook and cranny and corner there is something pretty interesting to find. You're never very far from a point of interest, or an NPC to talk to, or an encounter to encounter. Avowed is very similar, though a tad more gamified. Avowed's entire world feels incredibly handcrafted, and like almost every inch of the place was meant to be walked on and seen. There have been times I have gotten stuck and had to fast travel out, and even once where I clipped through a rock under the map, but these instances have been few and far between, maybe 2 or 3 times in 27 hours, which is like, every 2 seconds in a Bethesda game. The fact that everything feels like it's supposed to be seen comes through with the sheer volume of little secret areas with little glowing treats to find. Sometimes these are little god statue trinket things, sometimes they're purple chests, sometimes they're gold chests lurking in a hole in a wall that doesn't really look like it's supposed to be climbed on, but is just within reach of a jump. Sometimes there's what looks like a puddle of water that's actually a whole underwater tunnel system leading to a gold chest. Sometimes there's a hidden in plain sight electric panel to hit and start up for some free loot somewhere back behind you. There's tons of stuff. Basically, while running around the game world, while running around in dungeons or ruins or caves or whatever, there are so many little shiny bits to find. Most of the time, these chests are just some random upgrade materials or criminally underutilized enchanting materials, or some plain leveled weapon loot. The loot itself isn't all that exciting much of the time, to be honest, even though you really do need a lot of upgrade materials if you're going to use more than one weapon. But oh man, that sound effect telling me that there's loot around is enticing. That constant potential for a gold chest containing the most expensive upgrade materials or even unique weapons, armors, and jewelry is just so fun. If you're a gamer that has ever said, "Hold up a minute," or "Oh look, a shiny thing," then Avowed is absolutely incredible. My collectathon-loving wife would have a field day in this game trying to get all the unique armors and weapons and treasure maps and god totem pieces. There are so many things to find, and even when they aren't incredible finds, the process of finding them is just barely challenging and exciting enough that it is really fun to climb around and just look for stuff. I really feel well rewarded for exploring the world, even though the shiny noise and the placement of loot feels more like an arcade than a lived-in world like Skyrim or Baldur's Gate 3. Second, the combat is absolutely incredible. I was enjoying the combat on Path of the Damned in my first impressions after just 2 hours of gameplay, but I have to say I am loving the combat now, 27 hours in. Using a bow is so incredibly satisfying. Pulling back an arrow, charging a power attack for half a second, and then flicking my aim to hit an enemy is just so much fun. And getting the aim down without the crosshair is so satisfying. The gameplay in the background right now has some of this from my time in the second major zone, trying to stay spoiler free, but that's where it is. And I just have to say, it feels fantastic. There have been some moments where I'm running around kiting things, shooting, trying to heal my companions, topping up my own health and essence, trying to use my spells, and all of that while dodging and weaving from some super aggressive enemies. The battles in first person can feel exhilarating without really being frustrating, which is surprising. I don't die a ton, which is awesome, but getting smacked by an enemy really does hurt, and I do still die. Overall, I know that if I spammed my healing resources a lot more, I'd probably never die, because there haven't been very many one-shots at all thanks to my liberal use of heavy armor, which I think every build I've seen so far has criminally underrated. But there is a slight level of tedium to use the good healing food, and that prevents me from wanting to spam it, which is good in some ways and bad in some other ways. I do wish we could hotkey food, but you can't. Overall, I have to say that this combat system in Avowed is the best feeling first-person action combat I have ever played. It beats out first-person shooters like Call of Duty, even though it scratches a different itch. It beats out my favorite modded Skyrim runs that I've ever played. It beats out Fallout 4 and Starfield by miles. I've seen one comparison to Doom, and maybe I should go play a Doom game because maybe that's better first-person combat, but this is incredible. The only major gripe or flaw that I see with this system as it stands is that I want more of it. I want more varied enemies, and I want more active abilities that unlock a bit sooner. When focusing on the 2 weapon-centric skill trees especially, there just aren't that many active abilities to use or choose from, especially until you're like level 15 or so. This is a feature of the limited scope of the build and combat system, and I think my biggest hope for the game's coming DLCs is that we'll get a new ability tree for another class from the Path of Eternity games. I think that would be a huge win for replayability and for build expression. As it stands right now, it is really hard not to just have every build turn into a weapon plus wizard build, which is totally fine and very fun, but I think it might get a little bland in the future. Get subscribed though, because I have an Avowed project I plan to start recording this week that will try to break that mold and have a blast doing it. The last reason that I am totally loving Avowed right now is the lore. Aora, the world that Avowed takes place in, is incredibly detailed and a very cool world. The core concept of souls being these real things, almost eternal in nature and able to reincarnate by passing through the wheel, and sometimes that goes wrong, is super cool. The concept of the gods in Aora that I won't spoil for you here is absolutely bonkers and so exciting, and the way that the story is revealing more lore, even though it's a little predictable, has been very fun. I have really enjoyed the story, the characters, and the landscape of the living lands that Avowed takes place in. So much so that I'm actually thinking of going back and trying out the Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2 games. Except, like, maybe not. We'll see. Real-time combat with pause sounds like a rough thing to get used to after playing this and Baldur's Gate 3 and, you know, a bunch of other stuff. But the depth of this world rivals the Elder Scrolls games. And that makes a ton of sense given Pillars of Eternity was supposed to be a spiritual successor to the original Baldur's Gate, which some of the Obsidian team had worked on many years before. Those games, of course, are built on D&D lore, so if you're going to make a spiritual successor, you need a kick-ass and detailed IP and world to build that game on. And I would say that they have knocked it out of the park with the lore of Aora. I can't really say too much more without spoiling things here, though, unfortunately. So I'll just add one more point. Whoever designed this lore menu for dialogues is an absolute genius and a godsend. This feature should be industry standard after Avowed so that players, especially players new to the series or universe of the game's setting, can learn about the world they are interacting with almost seamlessly. The ability to open up this menu and read about any important or highlighted lore topics as a refresher after a couple of days away from the game, or after, I don't know, never seeing that word before, is incredible. Absolutely brilliant design. I don't know how I'm ever going to live in another RPG without this feature. I lied. One more point. I've seen some reviews of the game that say decisions don't matter as far as the story goes, and I have not seen that to be the case. Yes, it is distinctly possible that some decisions don't matter or don't matter much, but, and this is a big but, I have made some decisions that have absolutely affected major ways that I move through the game. Is there as much reactivity as Baldur's Gate 3? No, of course not. Lightning does not strike like that very often. Is this more reactivity than Skyrim ever had? Abso-freaking-lutely. In Skyrim, there were no faction interactions outside of the Civil War, and the dialogue trees basically always lead to the same place unless you end up killing the character. In Avowed, there are factions, and how you interact with those factions has a definite effect on what happens. Maybe on a second playthrough, I'll make different choices and find out that choices don't matter. But from what I can tell right now, after 27 hours and 2 full zones worth of questing, there are at least 4 significant factions that you can royally piss off, and some of these are exclusive to each other. Pissing one off will make the other happy and vice versa, and there may be more nuanced positions between those as well. I've actually gone into the 3rd major zone now, and there's another faction here that you can piss off or not piss off, and I'm very interested to see how some of the choices I've made play out. These faction interactions and quest interactions around those quests can also interact in interesting ways, opening up new solutions or new dialogue options. This is especially important because the timing of your interactions with a certain faction, I know for a fact, can influence how a quest plays out. Again, I can't say things without spoiling, but there are things that happen and change when you do things before other things, and it's very fun. Basically, Avowed is a fantastic game with a lot of hate around it for no good reason. There are some areas where the game could definitely be better, mainly in enemy variation and the number of ability trees with active abilities to flesh out builds, and maybe a few animations could be better. But on the whole, Avowed is absolutely worth your time if you like role-playing games and collectathons, and if it isn't worth your time, that's okay. It's worth mine, and I will spend some more time playing it and making some videos on it. Get subscribed for more Avowed, Baldur's Gate 3, RuneScape, and even Elder Scrolls Online content. Until next time, I'll see you all in the next excuse. Oh my god, you can pet your freaking bear.